Hey everybody, welcome back to the Hellacious Hero Returns. I am Hellacious Hero Joe. Please hit that subscribe button on the bottom there somewhere. I appreciate it. It supports the channel. I appreciate your comments, your constructive criticism, your likes. We can have a discourse. We can talk about things that you're passionate about, things that you might want me to cover in the future. So please subscribe. Hit that subscribe button. Pound that subscribe button now. This episode is titled The Face of Armageddon because it is based on one of my favorite comic books, graphic novels ever, The Watchmen. The Watchmen is an amazing graphic novel by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. It's one of the greatest stories ever. The art is astounding. If you haven't got a chance to read this graphic novel, I highly, highly, highly recommend it. This is a spotlight on Watchmen, this episode. Not only this, but things related to it. The movie's back there, as you can see. That's the director's cut, Zack Snyder's director's cut. The best version, in my opinion. Perfect, flawless. The Watchmen is such a really cool story. You know, there's the back, all the praise it gets. Such a phenomenal work. And, you know, this is old school. This was published in 1986, so there's not a lot of, you know, variant covers. I didn't really do that stuff back then. And this is considered, you know, by a lot of people, myself included, as a literary work. I mean, it's like you're reading a book. It's super awesome. The story is incredible, just excellent from beginning to end. If you've never read The Watchmen, if you've never seen the movie, it takes place in 1985. Richard Nixon is president for a third term. It's like Watergate never happened because of some of the actions of the United States and the appearance of superheroes that happened in the 1940s and 50s caused like a different, you know, timeline to happen. The events transpired differently. You know, Watergate never got exposed. The United States won the Vietnam War because heroes like characters in the book, Dr. Manhattan, the comedian, helped the United States win the Vietnam War. So it kind of causes things to transpire differently. I'm not going to spoil it for you. I'm going to talk about characters very subtly, shed light on who they are, give a brief kind of like talk about them. But it's just an amazing story. The thing I love about it is it's a critique on society, not only at that time, but I mean it applies today. And what I mean by that is they just, last year in October of 2019, made a Watchmen television series on HBO. The setting and the characters deviate from the graphic novel. I mean, they're completely different, but the whole social fabric there and the idea of what it's about still remains. I mean, there's some newer issues that are brought up in the TV series as opposed to the graphic novel, but the whole idea of how superheroes kind of created a sort of tension or conflict, and how people kind of saw them. It has a really Dark Knight Returns, that graphic novel by Frank Miller vibe, where Batman's this guy who's, you know, coming out of retirement, he's going back to fight crime, and people just don't like it. It's messing with the status quo. It's literally changing history in the way that the characters in the Watchmen, you know, graphic novel did. And it's an incredible read from beginning to end. You're going to have a favorite character, and Alan Moore wrote it that way because he kind of, every character represents a different kind of human personality, a different kind of mental state, a different kind of way of thinking. And it allows you to see that universe that they live in 1985 in New York. It allows you to see that universe from various viewpoints. Similarly to kind of the way that George R. Martin would later write the Game of Thrones books. That kind of thing where he does it by like a point of view thing. Like he'll entitle a chapter named after a character. Like a chapter will be called Sansa. A chapter will be called Jon Snow. A chapter will be called Daenerys, so on and so forth. Very similarly to the way the characters are created in that. It doesn't read like that. I mean, it can, if you think about it, but just the way it's constructed and the whole means of the story are constructed in that format. But in the new series in 2019, it takes place in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 2019, so it's 34 years after the events of the original story, Watchmen, and it's a continuation. But I just got to talk about characters here, and I want to talk about the TV series for a second here. And I know it's not related to the graphic novel, I'll get back to that. Sister Knight, played by Regina King, is an amazing character. I mean, one of my favorite comic book characters ever, and the series just premiered last year. I mean, she's a badass. She's like a police officer. She was a military woman. Just a kick-ass character. Just so badass. Love Regina King, and she's smoking as Sister Knight. I mean, she's beautiful. She's a beautiful woman. I love her take on the character, Sister Knight. Amazing. Incredible story. But the big players in Watchmen, you have Rorschach, Dr. Manhattan, Silk Spectre, Night Owl, Ozymandias, and in the beginning you have the comedian. And obviously the story is about who murders the comedian. You can see that from the cover. It's the bloody button. That might be a little bit of a spoiler. Sorry. But that's kind of what the characters do as they go through, and you kind of piece things together, and you're like, whoa. And that's what I mean. You get different perspectives. Some characters seem like they're super pure. Some seem like they're, don't know what to do. Some are really against, politics and society at large, and, just criminals generally want to kill them. Other people trying to save the world in weird, obscure, and maybe unethical ways, so to speak. But the great thing about it is you can relate to all these characters, and you can do that with the series as well. And that's what I mean, that people criticize the 2019 television series. I thought it was great. I thought it was a fantastic series. It's one of my favorite superhero series of all time. I mean, it's just super well written, interesting characters, interesting story, different from the graphic novel, which is awesome. People wanted it to be basically the graphic novel, but it wasn't, so that's why they were up in arms about it. But I loved it. You have the movie already. You don't need a TV series, The new take on it was amazing, and I'm bummed they're not doing a second season, because they have it titled now on HBO as a limited series, so it's like a mini series sort of, which is a shame because I love it. I mean, you seriously have to read this graphic novel and watch the TV series, the new TV series. They're, like I said, different, but the stuff there is great. It talks about undercurrents of racism. It talks about politics and political leaders can be corrupt, and how governments and agencies can manipulate and cover up truths and hide stuff. And there's a million different secrets and that's Rorschach, the character of Rorschach, the guy with the mask, like the Rorschach test. He's like a conspiracy theorist. He believes this stuff is, and I love Rorschach. He's one of my favorite characters. And then there's Ozymandias, who thinks that the world needs cleansed. I'm trying to save the world. I'm looking at the bigger picture. I'm looking at the future. He's the world's smartest man, and I love his character so much because my favorite historical figure of all time is Alexander the Great. I wrote my undergraduate and graduate thesis papers on that. Those were my capstone, my dissertation papers about the exploits of Alexander the Great. And Adrian Veidt, his superhero moniker, Ozymandias, is infatuated with Alexander the Great. He basically tries to be Alexander the Great, and I love that. I love that about it so much. I love every character in it, and that's why it's so good. Every character is amazing. Every character is different and unique in a way that they're not, similar, and they all have different viewpoints, and you can see where they're coming from. They might do evil shit or, like I said, unethical shit, but at the end of the day, if you put yourself in that character's shoes for a second and think about their lives or backstories, you get it. You're you can't hate them. You're okay, I kind of get it. Maybe one or two you might not really relate with, but you can kind of see where they're coming from, and I love that. Patrick Wilson plays Night Owl. Batman is my favorite superhero. Peep the shirt, and he's pretty much like Batman. He wears a suit that looks like an owl with a cape instead of a bat. He has tech. He has this floating ship called Archie, which is almost like the the Bat plane. And he kind of has his own little bat cave, sort of. Patrick Wilson is amazing. Daniel Dravberg, he's the second Night Owl. Like I said, in the 40s and 50s, when superheroes came, these new people kind of take over. So there's some like touches back to the older versions of the characters. Like Silk Spectre, her mother was the original Miss Jupiter, the original Silk Spectre. And she takes up the mantle later. And there's a conflict with them. They butt heads a lot. Patrick Wilson, amazing. I love his work. He's amazing Night Owl, and he was just an Aquaman as Orm, an Ocean Master. Super awesome character. He kicks ass. And Black Manta was in the new Watchmen series. So it's kind of cool how the DC Universe is kind of aligned and come together, right? Super cool. Loved it. Check out the graphic novel. Alan Moore's amazing. All of his work is amazing. Let me just go off on a tangent here about how amazing Alan Moore is. I know we're talking about Watchmen here, but Watchmen, probably the greatest graphic novel of all time. League of Extraordinary Gentlemen run. Swamp Thing. From Hell is an amazing graphic novel about Jack the Ripper, and it's a movie with Johnny Depp. Check it out if you haven't seen it. Fantastic. Ian Holm's in it too. The guy who played Bilbo Baggins in the Lord of the Rings movies. Amazing. V for Vendetta. Another politically themed thing. Hugo Weaving plays the titular character V, who's also in Lord of the Rings, as Lord Elrond. The Matrix, as Agent Smith. I mean, isn't it cool how things just come together? It's so cool. It's so cool. But, on a side note now, since I've talked about the Watchmen, you have to check it out. It's incredible. There are supplemental works that you really have to check out. And the first of those being this right here. Before Watchmen. Before Watchmen. There's so many people involved in this. I can't even remember everybody who's involved in this, but it's amazing. Alan Moore hates it because he didn't want DC to do anything with the characters after Watchmen. He wanted it to be a standalone literary work, and it is. I love Alan Moore. Alan, if you're watching, I love you. You are amazing. One of the greatest comic book or storytellers of all time. But your work is still immortal. Your work is still immortal. This is a continuation, and you have to separate them. You can't think of this as Watchmen. Watchmen is first, and that's why I showcase that first, because it is the epitome of everything that's related to it. Whether it be a prequel series or a sequel series, it is the epitome. Watchmen is the epitome. It is the #1 piece. It is the literary work. It is the immortalized version. It is the perfect version, like I said. This book covers things, obviously, that happened before the events of the Watchmen graphic novel and the movie. And some of the team-ups in here are just incredible. And like I always do, I want to show you guys some of the art in the back here, because it is absolutely phenomenal. Here's some stuff from the bonus gallery of Before Watchmen. The comedian, all these different artists, involved in this project. Rorschach. Just phenomenal artwork throughout. There's stories in here about the Minutemen, the first team under the original Night Owl, Hollis Mason. Go to Silk Spectre here. Just amazing art. Night Owl. I love that. Him and Rorschach together. It's fantastic. Dr. Manhattan. Moloch is in this. His story of how he becomes a villain. Super cool. And then Ozymandias. Oh, look at that. So good. Live Like a King. I love that. That's awesome too. I love it. Dollar bill. And then just some covers of the Watchmen in general. Concept art with the drawings. I mean, this omnibus is loaded with phenomenal content. At Night Owl, so good. Crimson Corsair. Some concept stuff. Like I said, that was before Watchmen. It's a supplement to Watchmen. It's all on its own. You know, Alan Moore's right in the fact that Watchmen should be a standalone thing, and it is. But these tie-ins, this prequel, and some of the other supplemental stuff I'm going to show you guys after, is awesome reading. I mean, it's really cool what they did with this stuff. Is it as good as the original Watchmen, in my opinion? No. But I give the creators, the artists, the writers in this so much credit. It's a concerted effort. It's incredible. Now, moving on from before Watchmen, an amazing event that I was so stoked for. And this is kind of the lead into it. This is called Batman Flash the Button. As you can see, the comedian's button is right there. And this has to do with this guy right here, ABDUL-MATEEN, the Reverse Flash. And it's kind of like a tie-in with the Flashpoint storyline and the WATCHMEN Universe. If you haven't read the Flashpoint storyline, it's one of my favorite storylines ever. There's an animated movie, too, called DC Flashpoint. Check it out. It's incredible. But it's about these time changes in different dimensions and so on and so forth. Batman's my favorite superhero, like I mentioned. My favorite part about Flashpoint is the Thomas Wayne version of Batman. In this continuity, instead of Bruce's parents getting killed in the alley and getting shot down by the guy with the gun, Joe Chill, Bruce gets killed. Yeah, pretty awesome, right? And his dad becomes Batman. But he's like this really ruthless and brutal version of Batman who goes around like beating the shit out of people, killing people. And his mother, Martha Wayne, becomes the Joker. She can't handle her grief and goes insane at the loss of Bruce and just becomes the Joker. And it's awesome. Jeffrey Dean Morgan played Thomas Wayne in Batman vs. Superman. Jeffrey Dean Morgan also plays in The Watchmen as the comedian. How cool is that? It's so cool, right? Boom! It's linked up every time. I love it. But I'm going to show you guys some art. As you can see, this is the variant cover gallery. Right? The art is so cool. I mean, I love the way Batman and Flash look. This one here is really cool. That's Thomas Wayne and Bruce Wayne. They cross paths in this. Because they're from different versions of reality. There's J. Garrett Flash. Super cool. Amazing. And that is kind of like the setup for this next event I want to talk about. Geoff Johns, one of the greatest comic book writers right now. I mean, he's written so many of my favorite stories. Two really big ones of my personal favorites are Green Lantern, as you guys see back there. His run with that character, Blackest Night, and that story was just incredible. So many awesome characters in that. If you like zombies and the undead and horror and those kind of things, check out Blackest Night. It's super awesome. There's these like demonic and evil zombie-like lanterns called the Black Lanterns. And you'll see what happens. You gotta read the story. Geoff Johns. Another one of my favorite things Geoff Johns did was his run on AQUAMAN in the New 52. And that's really what the movie with Jason Momoa is based on, is Geoff Johns' New 52 run. It's just an incredible run. It's absolutely fantastic. Check it out. But we're here to talk about the Watchmen today, and this is, by a lot of people, they call it the sequel, quote-unquote, to Alan Moore's Watchmen. Jeff Johns said this is not a sequel, it's a standalone story, and I'm going to have to agree with him on that. It has parts of the DC Universe and the Watchmen Universe in it, and the way he created it was there are two universes. There's a DC Universe and there's a Watchmen Universe, and then they come together. And the person who links all that stuff together is Dr. Manhattan. Dr. Manhattan actually appears at the end of the button, and that kind of sets the events in motion for Doomsday Clock, and the characters have to unite. I can't tell you how it starts off and what happens and why they do what they do, because it'll ruin Watchmen for you. Not so much before Watchmen, because it's completely different, but this kind of continues where Watchmen leaves off. I'm not saying it's a sequel, but it kind of has the sequel-esque vibe to it, but it's not. I mean, you could completely stand this by itself. There's a Part 1, Doomsday Clock Part 1, and as you can see, that's Superman in the background, right? With, like, Watchmen characters standing there, and some DC characters. Here's the back. Batman, Superman, Dr. Manhattan, Ozymandias, Rorschach, and then here's Doomsday Clock Part 2. And who's in the background there? Dr. Manhattan with DC characters mixed with Watchmen characters, right? And then on the back, Dr. Manhattan and Superman. And the whole crux of this story is kind of based on this. That's why I want to talk about it here for a second. Dr. Manhattan was a human who had some bad accident happen to him, and he detaches himself from humanity because he can't stand them. If you watch the movie, if you read the comic, you understand where he's coming from. He's kind of like emotionless. He kind of just can predict events before they happen. He doesn't really have any connection, really anything. You know, he can do things. I mean, he can stop bullets, he can turn things, he can create things, and he does a lot of that in the Watchmen comics, and before Watchmen, and this story in particular. It's really powerful stuff. And in contrast to him, Superman, Clark Kent, is an alien who wants to belong in a human world. Dr. Manhattan's a human who doesn't want to belong in the human world anymore. He just thinks that humans just, you know, everything's preordained. Like, that's just what it is. It just happens. There's nothing you can do about it at all. It's just all preordained. I've seen it. I know what happens. Where Clark's like, I'm an alien, and he's just trying to gain acceptance in the human world. It's so cool, the contrast between them. But I want to show you guys some variants. This is Doomsday Clock Part 1. That's Superman. And Dr. Manhattan one is super sweet. I love it. Of course, Rorschach and Batman is incredible. And my two favorite characters, Joker. And then some variants from Part 2. Rorschach beating the shit out of Joker. So cool. Superman and Dr. Manhattan. Love that. And that's pretty much it, you know, after that. I mean, that's it. That's Doomsday Clock. And the thing about the whole Watchmen concept, and, you know, the original graphic novel in particular, and then, you know, the prequel stuff with Before Watchmen, and the sequel stuff with Doomsday Clock, even though it's not really a sequel or a prequel, so to speak, you know, they're kind of related to it. They involve the characters. I can't say enough about the cultural impact of that. And it's what I stressed in my first episode of this show, The Hellacious Hero Returns. Just how comic books and art and fantasy and science fiction and even video games and music and all that stuff is related to everyday life. And there are just messages within art that people create that relate to us as human beings, that relate to society at large, that relate to so many different themes, i.e., in The Watchmen, like I had said earlier, political correctness, ideas of racism and undercurrents of racism, political corruption, that kind of stuff. It's just paramount. It is so paramount, and it's so important, and it really lets you look at the world through a lens of art, at how someone else interprets it. And it kind of sheds kind of like a wisdom on you almost when you read these books, because you're like, I never really thought of it that way before. And in particular, I stress that with the Watchmen because, as I mentioned earlier, there's so many different perspectives. Like all the different superheroes in Watchmen. It could be like any one of us. And you can find at least one character in that story to relate to. Because it was designed to be like that. And when you read it, you're like, wow, I get it. It's one of the best-selling graphic novels of all time. For a reason. It has such a phenomenal impact on the way things are looked at. And how we treat each other as human beings. And how things are. What is right? What is wrong? What is benevolence? Good. What is ambivalence? Like either or. What is malevolence? Evil. And it really kind of shows that. And to answer that question, I would have to say that it depends on who you are as a person. Everybody has their own ideas of what those things mean, right? And that really showcases it. So, please, please, please check out Watchmen. The original graphic novel, the TV series, and I recommend starting there first. Please start there first. If you're interested in what that has to offer, if you're a fan of it, and you think it's cool, and you want more supplemental stuff to check out Before Watchmen, or check out The Button, or check out Doomsday Clock by Geoff Johns. Amazing. They're releasing a paperback edition. I have 2 hardcovers because that's how they released them. 2 separate hardcovers, part 1 and part 2. But they're releasing the full story in paperback soon, a couple months. So if you can get your hands on that, you want to wait a couple months, you want to check out the other stuff first, and then get Doomsday Clock in paperback, I highly, highly recommend it. It's an incredible story. Love the Watchmen. Love Geoff Johns. Love Alan Moore. Love everybody who was involved in making this thing happen. I mean, even with the Before Watchmen omnibus, I mean, it's incredible. I love the characters. I love the story so much. You have to check it out if you're interested in that. Watchmen is my favorite graphic novel of all time, by far. It's one of my favorite live-action superhero movies of all time. And I want to let you guys know that I appreciate each and every one of you guys for tuning in and listening to this. Please, like I said earlier, hit that subscribe button somewhere down here. I want to hear what you guys have to say. Let me know what you think of The Watchmen. Let me know what you think of comic books. Let me know your thoughts on movies, video games, music, art, and the like. As always, my friends, do you. I'll see you guys next time on the next episode of The Hellacious Hero Returns. Right? Take care.